Hello everybody, my name is Professor Rich, and today we're going to look at reading an academic paper, something called intensive reading. So you better have your coffee ready and be ready to focus a little bit, because academic papers can be a little bit tricky. So how do you approach reading an academic paper? That's the question we might start off with today. Well, there are a few strategies you could use when you first look at an academic paper. Obviously, why are you looking at an academic paper? Well, maybe you're studying a master's or a PhD. Maybe you're doing some research, or maybe you're just interested in reading the latest academic studies on a certain subject. So, probably the way that you will approach an academic paper is you start by skim reading it. And that means looking at it quickly in order to get an idea of what it's all about. The essence of skim reading is to look at something and, as quick as possible, answer the question, what's all this about? Skim reading is a very quick activity. It doesn't require you to read fast. That's not necessarily what we do with skim reading. It's more that you look at the paper overall for clues as to what it's really all about. Now, for the paper that we're going to look at today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about what it's about. So that sort of skips the skim reading step. And then we're going to move directly into intensive reading. So what is intensive reading? Well, as a language learner, you might be aware that there's a scale of extensive to intensive reading. Extensive reading is absolutely fantastic, very, very useful for improving your English. And essentially, extensive reading is you read easy stories. It can be things like emails and messages, but basically, extensive reading is something that doesn't take a lot of energy, and it's quite easy to understand, and it's great for improving your reading fluency. It's good for consolidating your basic English grammar, and also it's fun. That's the critical part. Extensive reading should be fun, and you do a lot of it. Now, intensive reading, as a contrast, is a little bit different. Intensive reading involves reading things like the news at a more difficult level, novels and original language stories, which can be quite difficult to read, and of course, academic papers, which is our subject today. And then at the super grandmaster level of intensive reading, you have people like Immanuel Kant and Jean-Paul Sartre, which is almost at the level of tortuous reading, where you have to decipher every sentence with a dictionary of references. So, key characteristics of intensive reading: it's great for improving writing, because you often start to write in the way that you've read intensively. So it's great for improving your writing and also vocabulary. A great place to mine new vocabulary is intensive reading. So that could be one of the benefits that you get out of today's class. As we look at this academic article, you can pick up some new, excellent, fancy words to use in your vocabulary. Of course, it is tiring to do intensive reading. You need to focus. You need to work. Every paragraph requires thought, and it requires sometimes for you to reference certain things or check the meaning of words. So it does require a lot of energy, which is why you don't often do a lot of intensive reading, because you need a rest, you need a break. Your brain only has so much energy. So that's what we're looking at today. So the paper that we're looking at today, this is the title of the paper. The title of the paper is Artificial Intelligence for Academic Purposes, AIAP, Integrating AI Literacy into an EAP module. So, in order to help us understand what on earth that means, let's have a look at some of the terms here. And can you give me some sort of definition of what those terms mean? So, AI literacy, what do you think that means? EAP, does anyone have any ideas for EAP? I might have to help you with that. And what about module? In this context, what do you think module means? Does it relate to education? And in what way do you think it relates to education? So these are some questions for your folks who are joining us live and anyone who's watching this later. Hello there to Julia Hita. Hello to Sleepwalker. Hello, Manuel Gordillo. Hello to Maria del Carmen. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing, Maria? So, do we have any ideas, any suggestions on what I can mean by these terms? AI literacy. Do we have any suggestions before I give you a bit of an idea on this? Hi Zoya, how are you doing? We're going to look at a academic paper today, an academic paper, and the title is Artificial Intelligence for Academic Purposes, AIAP, Integrating AI Literacy into an EAP module. So Sleepwalker is suggesting that AI literacy is proper use. And Zoya is suggesting that it relates to artificial intelligence knowledge. So when we say literacy, literacy is a type of skill. It's basically a type of receptive skill of how do you interpret and read and understand something. So broadly speaking, AI literacy is something like the set of skills needed to interpret and read AI output correctly. Traditionally, AI literacy was a little bit more about the technical skills of understanding AI, but it's come closer now towards the user, that's us. So rather than being about the technicalities of AI, it's now more about how to use and understand AI. So EAP, I'll probably have to help you with this one. This one's an acronym, and it's English for academic purposes. English for academic purposes is an area of English teaching. So you may have heard of terms like TEFL and TESOL. TEFL is teaching English to speakers of teaching English to speakers of foreign languages. TESOL is teaching English as a second language or teaching English to speakers of other languages. Well, this is specifically English for academic purposes. So in other words, teaching English to non-natives who want to study in a British university or complete research in an English-speaking context. So, with that said, what do you think we mean here by module? We have the idea of EAP. What could module mean in this context? So Zoya has suggested section. I think I need a little bit more detail though, Zoya. On top of the idea of section, could you perhaps offer something a little bit more specific? A section of what? Let's just see if anyone has any other ideas about this. Remember that the context here is related to education. So Sleepwalker is talking about topics. So a module is actually a part of a course. So when you complete a course, the course consists of modules. And for each of the modules, you often obtain a grade or a score, and then your total score for the course is a collection of all of those module scores. So, for example, if you're studying English, then perhaps you'll have modules like speaking, listening, and reading if the course is separated in that way. It could also be separated in a different way. You could have modules on the environment and then a module on globalization. And for each of those modules, it's almost like the modules are like a sub-course. And then when you complete all of the modules, then you finish the course. So they're like parts of a course. So now that we understand those terms, we can think about what this article is going to talk about. Artificial intelligence for academic purposes, integrating AI literacy, that's the skills needed to interpret and read AI, into an English for academic purposes module. So basically, this is about teaching AI literacy to non-native learners of English who want to study at a British university or in an English-speaking context. So that's what the article's going to be about. So what do you think will be in this paper? Let's get the title up again. I'll put the title on the screen so you can have a think. Now, this is a good thing to do before we read the text, because it will give us something to check the text against by making a prediction about what we think is going to be in the text. And then we can check our ideas and have a think about it. So that's the title of the article there on the screen. And I'd like you to make some predictions about what you think will be in the paper. By the way, we're not going to actually read the whole paper. We're just going to read the first part, the introduction, and set the scene. And that will probably take some time anyway. But let's just make some predictions about what things will be mentioned in this paper. So any ideas, type your ideas in the chat and we'll put them together. And then as we read through the paper, we can think, oh, were our predictions correct or were they completely incorrect? And by the way, this idea of making predictions before you attempt to read or listen to something is a proven way of improving your comprehension in another language. So it's a very useful skill as a language learner to develop, to work on that ability to make predictions before you're about to read or listen to something in another language. Okay, so nobody has any predictions. Fair enough. So with our minds completely blank about what this article could possibly contain, let's read the first part. Oh, here come the predictions. Okay. Integrating AI into academic learning. And Manuel says in 10 years' time, AI will replace the majority of teachers. One teacher for 125 students. Well, we'll see about that, Manuel. All right, so we've got one prediction at least, integrating AI into academic learning. Let's take a look. Here's the first sentence. With the rise of generative AI, tools such as ChatGPT and their growing relevance in academic contexts, the need for AI literacy has become imperative, particularly for international students in EAP programs. So we've got some interesting terms here. The rise of, growing relevance, and imperative. So what do those terms mean? Let's define those terms. The rise of, growing relevance, and imperative. In this context, what do those terms mean, do you think? So for number one, the rise of, Sleepwalker has simply gone for increase. As a noun, really, isn't it? The increase. That seems pretty good for me. The rise of. So it's with the increase of generative AI. Growing relevance. Sleepwalker says popularity. I think we need something more than that, Sleepwalker. Because what is the idea of growing? And what about relevance? What does it mean to say that something is relevant? So growing relevance. Their growing relevance in academic contexts. Zoya's gone for increasing application. That's quite good, actually, Zoya. I think growing, we can definitely talk about increasing. Increasing application. I'm going to say that it's increasingly part of or increasingly appropriate. So increasingly part of or appropriate. In other words, this thing is becoming more and more important in a certain area. And when we say imperative, I don't quite think I would say imperative is about importance. Actually, Sleepwalker, I think imperative is more similar to this that you wrote here. Imperative actually means necessary. So if something is imperative, a good one there from Zoya as well. It's vital. So necessary or vital. In other words, the need for AI literacy is needed. It's necessary, it's vital. Julia says crucial. That's right. So we need AI literacy. And there's a comment here saying, particularly for international students. Isn't that interesting? In this paper, they're highlighting how international students in particular need to have AI literacy, which before we defined as the skills needed to interpret and read AI output. Great. Okay, let's move on. The study addresses the gap in practical guidance for incorporating AI literacy by developing and implementing a 10-week AI integrated EAP module at a pathway college in Scotland based on a novel framework termed AI for academic purposes. So we've got a few words here that we probably want to look at. We have gap, incorporating, a framework, and novel. So what do you think those words mean in this context? Let's have some suggestions. You can have a guess. It's always good to guess, even if you get it wrong. Do you know, if you guess about the vocabulary and then you get it wrong, you're still more likely to remember it afterwards because you engaged in some way. A lot of the skill of learning vocabulary relates to engaging with that learning process. So not trying to absorb things passively, but taking part somehow. And that's why it's so important to have a go and to guess. So gap, Sleepwalker's saying a lack of knowledge. I think it's enough to just say a lack of, or even a space, an empty space. Incorporating, we've gone for including. I think we can have a slightly better one there. Implementing, I don't think that quite is quite there, but good try. So incorporating means make it a part of. So when you incorporate, you're making something a part of the body, right? Corpo actually means body, right? So when we incorpo, that means put in the body, right? So what is the body here? Well, the body here is the EAP module. So inside the body, which is the EAP module, we are incorpo, as in putting in the body, incorporating this AI literacy. So we're putting this teaching of AI literacy into the EAP module, incorporating. Sleepwalker, who's pointing out that novel means new. You're absolutely correct. Well done. What about a framework? That's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it? We've got plan, strategy. Any other ideas for framework? All right, so framework is the structure underneath a system. So that could basically mean anything, right? Because what's a system? A system is like a collection of moving parts that forms a complicated thing. So a framework is the structure underneath that. So in this case, the framework is the structure underneath our incorporation of AI literacy into an EAP module. So the structure underneath that, which will offer us some sort of skeleton on which to build our classes and the things that we'll teach and the way that we teach them. And that's what a framework means in this context. Framework is used a lot in academic literature, academic papers, and actually in education in general. Okay, let's move on. There is a significant overlap between the skills typically taught in EAP courses and the capabilities and use cases of Gen AI, as both involve, for instance, summarizing and paraphrasing. So, what do we mean by an overlap? What do we mean by significant? And what are use cases? Have a think about that. What do you think about that? Julia's going for an overlap as a conflict. I don't think that's quite right, Julia. In some contexts, an overlap might be a negative thing, like a conflict. But here, I don't think that's the point. Yeah, Sleepwalker is going for a similar idea to Julia, saying that an overlap means a difficulty in mixing together. But actually, I think Zoya has the best one here. An overlap is like getting into each other. So an overlap just means commonality, a common area. So if we consider the group of the skills of EAP and the capabilities and use cases of Gen AI, then these two things have a common area. In other words, these two things overlap and there's a common area in the middle. This is your Venn diagram where you have the two circles, and in the middle of the circles, you have an area where they both overlap. Significant means important. Kind of. That's not bad. That's not bad. I'm going to say that significant means something meaningful. So if something is insignificant, it means it's not meaningful. It doesn't really mean anything. But if it's significant, it means it's something meaningful. So this is actually the same thing as saying a meaningful overlap. Now, what about use cases? Ranit, that's a pretty good one. So Ranit is defining overlap as a verb and says extend over and cover part of. That's pretty good. That's a good guess, Sleepwalker, but that's not quite right. Use cases is not information. It's quite a technical term, this. Use cases. It is related to applications, Julia. Well done. So use cases are situations when you use normally a technical product or device. So, for example, the use case of a mobile phone could be phoning a friend, or ordering a pizza, or searching for restaurants nearby your location. So these are use cases. They are the situations when you use something. That's a use case. Right. Let's move on to our next paragraph. Just as with EAP, GenAI can provide additional language support for international students whose first languages are not English. So EAP provides support for international students, and also GenAI provides additional language support for international students. So this again is part of the overlap. And I'm sure as language learners, you're quite familiar with how useful GenAI can be in this way. Let's move on. As EAP classes typically involve teaching how to avoid academic misconduct, they can offer spaces to address concerns regarding AI-related misuse or AIgerism by defining and modeling parameters of appropriate use and facilitating the development of this sensibly within students themselves. So, academic misconduct and sensibility. What would you say those terms mean in this paragraph? So Manuel, I think, is trying to give an example of a use case, saying, for example, right now I'm using a desktop. So that's not quite a use case, Manuel. The use case would be watching a stream. And you are using a desktop, and one of the use cases of your desktop is watching a live stream, right? So it's like a situation when you can use that device or program in order to do something, right? That's a use case. Zoya's gone for academic misbehavior, for academic misconduct. Incorrect use, says Sleepwalker, for misconduct. Not too bad. Academic misconduct is breaking the rules of academia. For example, copying someone else's work, or publishing a paper with your name on it when somebody else wrote it, right? So it's basically breaking the rules of academia. That's academic misconduct. What about sensibility here? Sleepwalker's gone for nuances. Is that right, Sleepwalker? Look at the sentence again. Facilitating the development of this sensibility within students themselves. Sensibility. What sensibility? The sensibility of addressing concerns regarding AI-related misconduct. So it's a sensibility related to AI-related misuse. What could that mean? Wisdom. That's pretty good, Zoya. We're getting close to something there. Understanding or feeling. Yes, that's very close, Pachu. It's something like that. It is indeed something like that. So when we say sensibility, it's something a bit like common sense, but in this case, it's not common sense. It's a different kind of sense. So we'll say something like the ability to respond to complex influences. So it's kind of like a sensitivity, but also it's acting sensibly with sense, in the same way that we say common sense. But here we're talking about a different kind of sensibility, not common sense, but something like AI-related misuse sense, right? So you're developing that sense, and that's a sensibility. You can kind of think of it as being like a cross between sense and ability, right? So it's like you have an ability and you have a sense, and put those together and you get a sensibility. Okay, moving on. Additionally, the generally smaller class sizes, closer student-teacher relationships, and focus on communication and discussion, typically found in EAP contexts, represent the optimal classroom environment for fostering AI literacy. So EAP has small classes. We have a strong student-teacher relationship. There's a focus on communication and discussion. That's all very good. But what do we mean by optimal classroom environment? And what do we mean by fostering AI literacy? Optimal is the best. That's very good, Sleepwalker. I like that. I think that's pretty good. What do we mean by fostering? Zoya's going for developing. That's pretty close. And Julia says promoting, which I think is even better. It's somewhere between those, actually. Fostering is like giving something the conditions to grow. When we foster, if you were fostering a plant, that would mean putting it into soil and watering it. It's like it's kind of like caring for it in a way. You're caring for it in a way that you want it to grow. So fostering AI literacy, it's like we're giving an environment where hopefully AI literacy can improve. Are you starting to see how intensive reading really helps with vocabulary? Because you get into all these things and you find all these interesting terms and start digesting them a little bit. For these reasons above, it can be argued that AI literacy should be integrated into EAP modules. Previous research on EAP students' perceptions of Gen AI supports this integration, yet no detailed framework for doing so has been provided. So, what do we think about all that? Put your suggestions in the chat as to what you think those terms mean. We have about another 3 or 4 paragraphs to look at, and then I'm going to give you some comprehension questions. So I hope you're paying attention to get ready to answer those comprehension questions about the text. Integrated, included. Not just included, but fully made a part of. So be fully made a part of something, right? If it's integrated, then it is fully incorporated into something. Students' perceptions, opinions, says Sleepwalker. Close. A standpoint. Close. Understanding. Feeling or experience. Pachu, you're on fire today. That's quite close. So this is how the students experience or see something. So perception is how we perceive, which means how we feel, experience, and see something. So at a very simple level, it is our opinion. It's like, what do you think about Gen AI? But it's also about how you experience it. Like, do you feel positive or negative about it? Do you feel that Gen AI is useful, or do you think it's not useful? Then a detailed framework, a concrete structure. That's very good. I think we're going to say comprehensive. We're going to say a comprehensive structure. So detailed or comprehensive, meaning that it's not just a basic outline. We're going to really give a step-by-step skeleton to underlie something. But no detailed framework has been provided, which is why this paper has a goal of providing such a framework. To address this gap, this article develops a framework for teaching AI literacy within an EAP context, which we refer to as AI for academic purposes. That's AIAP. So we're addressing the gap. Addressing the gap. What does it mean to address in this case? Point out, it can mean point out, but not in this case. Handle, yes, that's it. Well done. Good job, Julia. Yeah, in this case, we mean solve the problem. Handle the issue. That's what we mean by address here. This framework was conceived in response to issues we as EAP practitioners were encountering on the ground, such as an increase in AI-related academic misconduct, a lack of understanding from students of how to interact with or prompt these tools effectively, and a tendency to blindly trust information output from Gen AI. Conceive. We conceived the framework. Blindly trust. Sleepwalker's gone for thought over for conceive. That's not quite right. That would be more like consider. Conceive is more at the starting level. Made into, not really. No, okay. So conceive in this case means create using the mind. It's creation. So the framework was actually created, but conceive gives a bit more of a complex idea of creation, not just thinking of an idea, but a complex creation of a framework using your mind. What about blindly trust? Absolutely trust. But what does it imply when we say blindly, Sleepwalker? What is the implication when we say that we're blindly trusting it? Which obviously they are using as a negative here, that students are blindly trusting it. Well done, without judging. Yes, that's right. So blindly trust. Have faith in something without evidence to do so. Right? Or maybe reason. We're trusting without reason, without evidence. So blindly trusting. Having faith with eyes closed. Based on this framework, we have designed a concrete AI-integrated EAP module with a carefully structured week-by-week curriculum, which not only embeds AI literacy, but also aligns it with the development of critical academic skills. This can offer a practical and replicable model for EAP educators, thereby advancing the discourse on AI literacy in academia. Embeds is an interesting one as well, so let's add that to our list. All right, embeds, replicable. I need to check it. Replicable. It's replicable. A replicable model. This model is replicable. Replicable. A replicable model. Embeds, contains. Pretty good. Contains within. Yeah. Or even puts within. Replicable, identical, no. Carry more than one, no. Remember, able means you can, and replic is from replicate. So what does it mean? It means you can be used again, Zoya. Well done. You can repeat or use again this model. And what's a model? A model is like an example, right? So it's like you can repeat or use again this example. Great. And what do we mean by advancing the discourse? Repeatable, says Vitelli. Well done. That's right. What do we mean by advancing the discourse? Promoting? No. Elevating? No. Opening? No. Making it prominent? No. No, that's not it. Good guess, by the way, all of you. Increasing? No. Improving? Kind of. Enhancing? That's pretty good, Julia. That's the closest so far. Okay. So it means we're moving the discussion forward. Advance means move forward. And the discourse is the discussion. So we're moving this discussion forward. Okay? The discussion has been here for a while, and now we're moving it forward. We're taking it to the next step. We've been talking about the problems with AI for ages. Now it's time that we make this framework and we start teaching it. So we're moving the discussion to the next step. Okay, we're pushing it forward. All right, so that is the end of our reading section for today. Now I have on the screen some false statements about the article. I want you to correct the false statements. This is a little comprehension test for the article. It's also a memory test because you might not actually remember everything. Take a look at the sentences on your screen and take a moment to think about those. Try to correct the false statements. I'll give you a minute or two or longer to do that. If you're watching the video later, then you can pause the video now and take your time to try to correct those statements. So you need to correct the false information in each of those statements. And of course, if you've enjoyed the class today, do smash that like button and hit subscribe. Not quite sure what's happening with my smash that like button and hit subscribe thing. Is it playing? Ah, there it is. Maybe I just missed it. I love that thing. I should make more of those things. It's good fun. It would be great to have like 10 of them, wouldn't it? Manuel says, today I'll need extra magnesium dose. Too much information for my brain. Yeah, I know what you mean, Manuel. Welcome to academia, huh? That's what it's all about. Dealing with this kind of stuff. Literally reaching for my vitamins right now. You live on an island, so surely you eat a lot of fish. We're going to go through some answers in a moment. I'm just going to give you guys some time for the people in chat to have a go at this live. Try to type what they remember from the article. Right, I'm going to go through some of these. Keep typing your answers into the chat, and I'll do some corrections here. So the overlap that the authors highlight is mainly in skills and use, such as paraphrasing and summarizing text. Because of academic misconduct risk, the article recommends banning Gen AI for EAP and international students. No. In spite of academic misconduct risks, the article recommends not banning Gen AI in EAP for international students. Rather, it recommends instruction and guidance. I can't remember who AI jurism was attributed to. Who was it attributed to? Chan. It was Chan 2023. So not Ding Al. And Chami and Lin are cited as supporting zero tolerance prohibitions rather than modeling appropriate use. No. They're cited as supporting appropriate use rather than prohibitions. I don't know if it was Chimmy and Lim, so I'm going to say, and other papers. Okay. EAP is portrayed as large lecture-style courses, making them poor environments. No. As small, intimate class rooms, making them good environments for building AI literacy. They also emphasize discussion, if you remember. Prior studies are summarized as mostly opposing Gen AI and EAP. No, supporting. And AIAP is presented as an institutional compliance policy focusing on detecting AI misuse. No. Institutional framework for teaching AI literacy in an EAP context. All right. So there's the corrections for you. There's the original false sentences. So you have those in the notes. That's the reference. If you wish to actually read the article, you will probably need some sort of academic subscription. I don't think it's open source. We're now moving on to questions and answers, but I will put the notes for today in the chat as well. And those will also be available down below the video. So thank you very much for joining me today, everybody. If you have any questions now about today's class or English learning in general, then I'll do my best to deal with those questions. Does anyone have any questions on their mind before I retire for the day? Next week, there will be no stream, 100%. The week after that, there will also be no stream. So unfortunately, we've got a bit of a break coming up again. Yeah, Manuel says, when's the next? Well, not next week or the week after. So no stream for the next 2 weeks, folks. Well, for the next 2 Saturdays, I may do a stream midweek. Just look out on the channel. I'll put it up 12 hours or so before if I go live, but definitely not the next 2 Saturdays. Right. No particular questions. In that case, everybody, please do have a lovely, relaxing weekend. I wish you all the best. And thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you again, hopefully soon. What else can I say? I've kind of lost my steam here. Have a lovely couple of weeks, everybody. If I don't see you, maybe I will see you if I do decide to stream anyway. It's been great having you. I've no idea. What is this, Patchy? Why do you have no spaces? If you want to change your course, then you should email someone like your course tutor, or if you have contact at the school or university. Oh no, we have some grammatically correct things here. Number 1 is correct. Number 2 could be correct. Number 3 is a bit weird, but it could be possible depending on what you're saying. But 3 is a bit weird. 4 is a bit strange as well. We don't tend to use the possessive like that with evening. We could say a summer's evening, but this summer's evening is a bit weird because the summer doesn't really have an evening, does it? This summer season's evening. Yeah, I don't really like that either. On a summer evening, yes. In a summer evening. What are we doing on... We're going to have a party on a summer evening. Yes, 5 is good. In a summer evening. That sounds a bit weird. In this summer evening. On this summer evening. On this summer evening. You know, all this idea of this summer evening sounds very kind of narrative, like a story. You know, like I don't think it's a very usual way of talking about an evening in summer. On this summer evening. That's the one I like. On this summer evening. Number 3. So number 1 is okay. Number 3 is good. Number 5 is good as well. When you're not being specific. You're talking in general. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely week. See you again soon. Catch you later.